Hello, welcome to Progressive Farming Company's how-to series on managed grazing systems. I'm Emily, I'm the sales manager here at Progressive Farming, and I'm joined by James, who's the director.
Hi Emily, thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. So in this series today, we are going to cover everything you need to know about designing your own grazing system. So who is Progressive Farming? Progressive Farming, we are a UK business, an online UK business, supplying electric fencing equipment, mobile watering equipment for livestock, plus Energisers and tools. We are the UK stockist for Kiwi Tech. We also stock Hayes, Pell and Speedrite. You can find everything we stock and do on our website, www.progressivefarming.co.uk. There we list the whole range, including helpful how-to videos, all of our pricing, and you can buy direct on the website through our online shop. So I'm going to hand over to James now, who's going to talk through what we cover in this grazing series.
Yeah, thanks Emily. So this series is a 5-part series, and we're going to cover everything you need to know about how to design your own managed grazing system. That's going to include the benefits of managed grazing, design of the system, electric fencing, Energizers and earthing, and water systems. So we look forward to sharing our knowledge with you, and we really hope you can join us and you'll also enjoy working your way through this 5-part series. Hi, and welcome to part 3 of this how-to series from Progressive Farming Company. In this part, we look at electric fencing. In parts 1 and 2, we looked at the benefits of managed grazing systems and how to design a grazing system for your farm. In this part, we'll cover electric fencing, and don't forget to check out parts 4 and 5, where we'll be covering Energizers and earthing, as well as water system and water system design.
This part has quite a lot of content to cover, so if you're short on time, looking for something particular, or jumping back in, here's a short table of contents with the key topics and the times at which they start in this video.
So what are the benefits of electric fencing? It's very effective, very low cost, has a long life, flexible, it's quick to erect, can be portable, and will provide a high return on investment when it's used for or to enable grazing management. The benefits far outweigh the negatives, but there are a couple to be aware of. One, animals need to be trained. So animals new to electric fencing need to be trained to respect the fence, to recognise it and to know not to touch it. And because we're using a fence which is live, it's carrying a voltage, it does need some specialist knowledge to install. Fortunately, these are minor disadvantages and easily overcome with a couple free guides. So the first of all is a guide on how to train your animals, and that's available from the Progressive Farming website. And the second is this how-to series where we're passing on knowledge, not just how to install, but also how to design your grazing management system using electric fencing. So we said it's low cost, but just how low cost is it? If a conventional stock fence, being big netting or sheep netting and a couple of strands of barbed wire, is now costing around £5 a metre, with the labour to erect at least £3 a metre, giving a total cost of £8 a metre. Something like a permanent electric fence could vary from materials costing £1 to £2 a metre and labour from 50p to £1 a metre, giving a total cost for a permanent electric fence of around £1.50 to £3 a metre. So far more or far less than half the cost of a permanent stock fence. When it comes to temporary electric fencing, so that's the fencing that's particularly portable, the materials costs are lower, and there's a minimal labour cost associated with erecting and moving that fence. You'll note there that because there's a labour cost with the temporary fencing, if you're in a position where you start to erect a temporary fence in the same place each grazing rotation, it's a clear signal or sign that perhaps you should consider erecting a permanent electric fence in its place, where you pay for the labour up front, but it saves you time and effort through the rest of the season and in years to come. Where electric fencing is becoming particularly useful is on areas of the farm where the land may be in rotation, so it may be sown in a temporary lay for a short period of time, but still needs to be grazed efficiently, or for land you wish to improve, such as rented land, where maybe the tenancy isn't as secure as at land at home. So both temporary and permanent have their place, and today they offer significant advantages over conventional stock fencing. So we're going to start with permanent electric fencing, and this is most commonly used for boundary fencing and for the subdivision of existing fields to make paddocks. So some of the sections we're going to cover, or some of the topics we're going to cover, we'll look at high tensile wire, fence posts, insulators, tensioners and strainers, gateways and tools. So starting with the wire, we prefer or need to use high tensile wire as opposed to mild steel wire, because the high tensile wire will maintain a constant tension even under changes in temperature. Tension is important because it means our wire height is going to stay consistent, and consistent wire height is key for an effective fence. The diameters of wire we will tend to use range from 1.6 to 2.5 mil, with our preference being 2 millimeter. And for Progressive Farming Company, we stock a wire made by Cyclone, which has got an aluminium coating, meaning it's as conductive as 2.5 mil high tensile, but it's 2/3 of the weight, which allows you to increase the post spacing, therefore reducing the total cost per meter. So particularly effective for internal subdivision, splitting fields into paddocks, and very useful when using with more than 2 wires, as it allows a large post spacing to be maintained whilst additional wires are added to the fence. To start and finish our fence, or to take up the tension in a turn, we're likely to be using a pointed wooden post, ideally tannalized or creosoted, or a metal post such as the Clip-X range. This really should be the best you can afford, as the reliability of the fence depends on it. If you're using a wooden post, it may be possible to reuse these posts depending on your soil type. Metal can definitely very normally be reused multiple times. Again, thinking in the context where we maybe are fencing a field that's in an arbor rotation, or maybe fencing land we don't own. The tables are for information showing the recommended diameter of the post as well as its length for a given number of wires. It specifies there both the wooden strainer posts, the ones that are going to start and finish the fence, as well as the turner posts, and they're going to take the force if there's a significant change in direction or of contour. Note there that if you go to 5 wires, it's recommended that you use a strut for the strainer post and maybe a strut for the turner post depending on ground conditions. When it comes to intermediate posts, the recommendation from Progressive Farming Company is to use fiberglass. The benefits of fiberglass are numerous. First of all, it's got a 30-year life expectancy, and that's been proven and validated in New Zealand where they're made. They're super quick and easy to install. It's completely possible to carry 100 plain fiberglass posts under one arm, which makes fencing off a quad bike or fencing in wet ground conditions or sloping terrain a real breeze. Fiberglass, by its nature, is an insulator, not a conductor, so it means there's very, very low chance of leakage back to the earth, which maintains a good and high voltage. Under impact, they bend, not break, and that makes them really different to a steel post, which, although might have a similar life expectancy, if it happens to come under impact from animals or vehicles, they simply bend and eventually break. They can also be moved and reused. Again, really useful in that temporary lay or rented land situation. All that combines means they're extremely cost effective, being easy to handle, quick to install, and having a long life. So we sometimes refer to the fences built using these posts, using fiberglass posts, as being semi-permanent. They could stay there for 30 years, or they could be there for 2 or 3 years and before they're moved again. The fiberglass posts made by Kiwitech come in 2 diameters. For semi-permanent or permanent fencing, we use the 10 mil diameter. This is the larger diameter of the 2, and they come in 2 lengths as well as 2 types. The standard and cheapest post is something called a plain post. It's a 10 mil diameter by 1250 mil or 1500 mil long UV protected fiberglass post, which is driven straight in the ground. The table in the center there shows the depth into the ground, which is around 300 to 350 millimeters, and the height above ground, which sits at around 920 mil for the shorter post and 1100 mil for the longer post. There's an additional type of post called an arrow post, and we'll have a look at that one next. But before we do, let's have a look at the intermediate post spacings. So this is true of both post types, and again, it will vary farm to farm as well as ground to ground. So it's shown here for a guide. The table gives the recommended post spacing based on the number of wires being used. Again, it's a guide. The primary focus or awareness should be that the wire must follow the ground contours. So therefore, the post must fall or must be positioned every time there's a change in contour. Therefore, the post spacings may have to be reduced where you're fencing across a field or paddock which is particularly rough. If you're fencing in areas of high stock pressure, for instance stock races or around gateways, it's sensible or recommended to reduce the post spacing by 2 to 5 meters from the distances in the table, just to give extra visibility and extra strength to the fence line. If you're going to budget for, or doing a budget for when ordering materials, recommend running or using the minimum post spacing. It's never an issue to have a few spares left over at the end of the job. The final point, as shown by the diagram below the table, is to keep the post at 90 degrees to the ground for a consistent wire height. And consistent wire height in electric fencing is super important because it's part of an effective fence. So, the Kiwitech arrow posts. Well, we can show you a short video of how they are used in practice. So this is a fiberglass post molded onto a nylon head. The nylon head's got 2 barbs, and before it's planted in the ground, the barbs should be triggered by bending them out. This means that the natural springs, when they're driven in the ground, they'll be pushing out against the soil and against the roots of the plants to gain a firm holding. When erecting the fence, it's always sensible to drive in the strainers and any turning posts, and then run out the first wire and tension it using a strainer or a Hayes wire strainer, giving you a straight line at which to erect the post against. The arrow post is inserted in the ground using the arrow post rammer. This is a special tool with a nylon lined sleeve to avoid scratching the UV protective coating on the fiberglass. As the post is driven in, it may require a foot just to keep the post upright, and again it should be 90 degrees to the floor. It's driven in just over 300 millimeters, 30 centimeters or just over a foot into the ground. Once planted, the wings fold outwards and provide excellent and superior ground holding such that the arrow post can be used to hold the fence up as it goes over rises or take the fence down through the bottom of valleys. It's a really, really effective tool and gives a lot of strength to the fence line. Demonstration of how strong these fence posts are. There's a fence line being driven over. That fence line uses arrow posts and also has hyper springs in the fence line, which we'll come to later. Moving on from posts, we're thinking about insulators. So for wooden posts, we have 2 options. These are a staple-on insulator. First option is a wooden claw insulator, and the second is a wooden pinlock insulator. The difference between the two is to get the wire out of the claw insulator, you need to have enough stretch in the wire to be able to twist it upwards at an angle before you can pull it out of the insulator. The pinlock, to release the wire, just a matter of pulling out the pin and the wire will drop out. Similar story with the Kiwitech insulators. The number 3, the galvanized clips, they're a super tough and really cost-effective insulator. Because the fiberglass post is, of course, insulated, we can use a galvanized insulator, and these insulators or galvanized clips are really tough, and they're put on by hand, can be adjusted to any height, and then the wire is closed into the back of the clip using the galv clip applicator. The number 4, the nylon wedge clips, they're a 2-part. They've got a nylon clip with the 2 fingers, and then a wedge which is driven down the back. Again, quick to install, fully height adjustable, so you can spec your heights to suit your stock class. The nylon wedge clips, to release the wire, the post can be leant over, normally to the left hand as you look at the posts, and the wire can simply be pulled out from between the fingers. With the galvanized clips, you need the tool to release the wire from the clip. So the nylon wedge clips are preferred where we may need to adjust the height, and or it'll be useful to be able to release the wire from the posts, for instance, to peg the fence down and form a temporary gateway. To start and finish our fence, we need to insulate the wire from our strainer posts, whether they're metal or steel, particularly important obviously if they're steel. So the two main options to do this is number one, the speed right end strainers, sometimes called egg insulators. So there's a special method of tying off, starting with a termination knot against the wooden post, leading through to a wrap of the wire around the end strainer, and then tying off with 6 tight wraps, as you see in the photo below. The second option is to use a ball nose ratchet strainer. So that's effectively the end strainer, the insulator, built into a ratchet tensioner. And we'll look at the benefits of those over the page. So as well as insulating the fence at the start and the end, we've got to think about how we're going to tension the fence. So one option is to use an inline tensioner or a tension wheel, so-called because of its shape. They're really helpful. They tension the wire and they can be installed anywhere in the fence line. So if you've got a fence line with a lot of contour, a lot of corners, they can be installed in the middle of all the bends, and as you tension them using the tool, they'll pull the wire from both sides, effectively pulling the wire into and onto the wheel itself. They are capable of storing a reasonable amount of spare wire, which is helpful for repairs or to make any changes to the fence line, particularly for any wire gates that might be installed. The second option, we saw previously, is the speed right ball nose ratchet strainer. It's an insulation tensioner one. You have to install it, however, at the end of the fence line, where it saves a little bit of time off work, but means that it can only pull from one end of the fence. Because the ratchet barrel is quite narrow in diameter, or quite small in diameter, it's very useful for short pulls and will put a lot of strain, particularly on a short pull, somewhere where the inline strainer, the wheel, may be less effective. The third option for tension is the Cubitech Hyperspring. This provides quite often much needed stretch to the fence. It allows the fence to cope with impact from livestock or vehicles, as well as adding the stretch needed to trigger or to use with a wire gate. We'll look at those later in the guide. To see the spring in action, you should watch this video. And what we can see there is the arrow posts and the hypersprings work in combination to take up the impact from this person. That resilience in the fence line means that it's very rare to see any damage to incur to the fence, even if it has unexpected impact from animals, or from vehicles. The flexibility also allows the fence line to be pegged down so that temporary gateways can be created anywhere, which is really useful for moving stock. As we saw again previously, it can also be crossed with a modified vehicle, allowing you to gain access quickly to groups of stock whilst doing grazing or paddock systems without the need for lots of gates. When we're using the hypersprings, there's two sizes. Which size we use depends on the diameter of wire we're using and the length of our fence. So there's a 1.6mm hyperspring, and that's suitable for 1.6 or 2mm wire, and it can be used for a length of wire from around 50 meters all the way up to 1,000 meters. There's a larger spring, which is made using 2.5 high tensile. Again, that's suitable for 2mm to 2.5mm diameter wire, again with a wire length of 50 to 1,000 meters. The asterisk is there for a caveat because 1,000 meters assumes no corners, minimal or no contour, and therefore if the fence line does have any of those, then extra springs may need to be added as required. In most of the grazing systems we see designed, the average fence length is somewhere between 250 and 500 meters. One spring is normally completely sufficient to operate a set of gates, as well as provide access for vehicles to cross that fence line. So moving away from the fence and onto gateways, there's two options, or two main options for creating or installing gateways in the fence. These gateways are likely to be at the ends of the fence, or sometimes occasionally in the middle of a field. We split it maybe into 4 paddocks and we've got a set of gates in the centre. The first option to consider is the SpeedRite bungee gateway. So that is available as a kit, and it will build you a 6 to 8 meter gateway. It's always useful to have large gateways for vehicle access as well as for moving larger groups of stock. Perfectly possible to set up a bungee gateway or a wire gateway to cope with up to 3 wires. However, when it comes to opening that gateway, it means you've got 3 handles to deal with, and with a group of hungry sheep behind, that can sometimes cause a problem. However, the bungee is flexible and visible, so flexibility is really useful if you've got a gateway which you need to open up onto a track, or a gate that needs to run between 2 or 3 posts where the distances may not be perfectly correct or perfectly equal. However, bungee has, however, got high resistance, so it's not a good conductor. It's not as useful for taking power through, and it's got a finite lifespan. Eventually, the bungee will perish and decay and need replacing. So the other option is the QTech wire gateway. So the components there are super hardcore, pretty indestructible, and the wire, you use a high tensile wire in that gateway situation, which is really useful for transferring current with no losses. So you can take power around the system using the wire gateways. Caveat to those is that you need to use them with the QTech hyperspring, provide the stretch, because the wire's got no stretch, obviously, unlike the bungee, so there needs to be a hyperspring installed in the fence line to use that handle setup. Moving on from perhaps more than 2 wires, if we get to 3 or 4 wire fences, then the QTech intergate really comes into its own. So you can see it there in a variety of poses and situations. It gives one-handed operation, and it will transfer the current through the gateway with no losses. The high tensile wire is connected directly to the gate pole, which is insulated top and bottom and live in the middle. It can be used in a variety of configurations. The setup means that when the gates open, tension is maintained on the rest of the fence, and therefore the gate is able to open. The gate pole or the intergate post or pole itself has a spike on the bottom, allowing it to be pushed into the ground to hold the gate open whilst moving stock. So it's an extremely effective way of adding a gate to the fence line. It's also very cost effective, particularly when considering the cost and time needed to install a permanent stock gate. So that wraps up our permanent electric fencing section, and we can move on to temporary electric fencing. So temporary electric fencing is, it's an awesome, it really opens up the options for grazing management. The only thing to be aware of is there's still a cost to using it, both to buying it and to moving it regularly. So if it comes to a situation where you're going to start to re-erect a temporary fence in the same place several times over a season, that's really flagging up that you should consider putting in a semi-permanent or permanent electric fence in the place, and then allowing the temporary gear to sort of go and work harder somewhere else on the farm and create more benefit. Within temporary fencing, there's a number of components or a number of things to consider, and we'll run through looking at something called the QTech pack, the geared reel system, posts, otherwise known as tread-ins, polywire, end assemblies, and insulated handles. So methods of putting up a fence, what that fence looks like, what you use to erect it, and then how you stop and start the fence line. So starting with the QTech pack, these are, trust us, the quickest way to erect and reel in a fence up to 3 wires in a single pass. So they're like a system approach where you have something called a geared winder that comes in 1 wire, 2 wire, or 3 wire versions. It can be carried under the arm or mounted on a quad bike. You can use it with any of the QTech spools, and they come in 3 lengths from 150 to 400 meters. And most of the options come with a rack. You can see in the picture on the top right. And that rack will carry up to 30 posts. So the exciting thing with this option and this system is it allows you to carry all the materials you need to erect and remove a 1 or 2 wire 400 meter fence or a 3 wire 300 meter fence. So it really is a one pass solution, and that's where it differs to other options in the marketplace. So one of those other options is a geared reel. Now they are super simple and easy to use. They're geared 3 to 1. The QTech pack is 4 to 1. So with the gear reel, it's going to take slightly longer to wind the fence in. You're going to need 1 geared reel per wire on the fence. So if you've got a 3 wire fence, you'll need 3 gear reels. As you can probably guess from this, from the look of the geared reel, you can only use one at a time unless you've got more than one arm, more than 2 arms. So therefore, if you've got a 3-wire fence, you need to reel in each wire separately in order to remove the fence. The QTech pack system differs because you can reel in multiple wires at once. The geared reels, though, have got the advantage that they'll hold more polywire. The standard reel in the picture will hold up to 500 meters of polywire or 200 meters of 12mm tape. There's a mega version, which is an extra wide reel that will hold up to 1,000 meters of 6-strand polywire or 400 meters of 12mm tape. So they've got advantage from being particularly simple and a larger capacity compared to the pack system, but they do require more walking to use them on farm. It's also worth insisting as a systems approach. With the QTech system, you have one pack. The pack in the picture there is the simple version, so it doesn't carry the posts. It's therefore, if you like, a direct equivalent to a geared reel system. That one pack you can use to reel out or wind in any number of spools and of any length. So in essence, you have a geared winder which you pop the spools onto, and you then use it for that spool. When you finish putting up the fence, you sort of leave the spool on the fence line, and the spool's got no gears. It's fairly cost effective to leave on the fence, and you take the pack and you go and pop on another spool and reel out or wind in another fence. So the pack comes with you. You might have one pack per person, one pack per block, and you have whatever length spools you need for that paddock or for that system. The geared reel version, by contrast, you need one geared reel per wire. So you have multiple geared reels, and sometimes they'll spend a lot of their time just sat on the fence doing nothing. You're not really using the gears, you're just leaving quite an expensive bit of equipment, sat on the fence, wound with some polywire. So the QTech system's got an advantage in the right situation where you're going to use lots of spools. It's a much cheaper system to get up to speed with and to use. So let's see what it looks like in quad bike form. So this is a video showing the vehicle 3-wire pack. You see the operator whilst standing on the quad bike, positions the pack on the front, and then is able to stop the bike, safely demount, stand in a treading post, or QTech fiberglass post, move the vehicle on, and repeat the process again. You notice how, due to the particularly unique clip design on the post, it's easy to connect all 3 wires from the seat of the bike, and this makes the erection and then subsequent removal of the fence particularly quick. When the bike reaches the end of the fence, the spools are easily removed and they can be attached directly to the fence or can be tensioned using QTech end assembly. As an alternative, we can have a look. At using the QTech 1-wire carried pack. So similar in design to the 3-wire vehicle pack. This is a pack which is carried under the arm. It uses the 4:1 ratio gearbox, so it means it's really quick to wind in the fence. So the wire can be detached from the post without just using the pack itself due to the unique clip design. There's no need to use your hand. And the posts are safely stored in the pack. The polywire is then attached to something like a boundary and fence erection begins. Fence erection using the pack is super quick. You're carrying all the posts with you as well as the wire. And the only reason to stop walking is just to stamp the post in the ground. Posts can be connected as you walk, so it means for a really quick solution. As we said previously, you only need one pack per farm, and you can use that pack for any number of fences. So that pack was stacked with the QTech temporary posts. The QTech temporary posts are made using fiberglass. It's a 9mm diameter post and standard height is 1,000 millimeters, or 1 meter. The 9mm is a bit lighter than the 10mm used in the permanent electric fencing, but it gives the same characteristics, being super light, super flexible. The Kiwitech posts have a nice wide foot made from nylon, super tough, and at the bottom of that foot, it's got a 9mm hardened steel pin. That pin actually comes in two lengths. The standard tread-in uses 100mm, and the long tread-in, which is used for corner assemblies or for end assemblies, uses a 200mm pin. So it gives excellent ground holding in all conditions, particularly in forage crops or in wet clay soil. They come in a range of types, 1-wire, 2-wire, and 3-wire being the most common. It's possible to add extra wires if needed, and of course the clips can be assembled to give you whatever wire height you desire. There's also options for corner assemblies and for end assemblies. The end assemblies we'll look at later on. The corner assembly is a clever sort of turner and strut or strainer and strut arrangement where the clip actually connects around, or the insulator connects as a clip around the strainer post, allowing the post to be supported and providing really good ground holding. The other option or alternative, most commonly used in conjunction with the geared reel, is the Speedrite 1-wire pigtail post. These are 1100mm long and they make a 920mm high fence. They're only available in the 1-wire version, but the pigtail has been a sort of reliable choice of posts for many years now. Pretty simple to use. It's narrow diameter shaft. It means they're relatively easy to carry, although they're about 3 times the weight, or one post is around 3 times the weight of a Kiwitech tread-in. The large diameter pigtail loop means it's possible to use with tapes and braids, and even possible to pull a insulated handle back through the posts if you want to wind in the wire before removing the posts themselves. So moving on to look at polywire. The Kiwitech polywire is made by Kiwitech themselves in New Zealand. It uses 6 0.2mm stainless steel strands, and it uses a super special weave in construction to ensure a consistent shock contact. So it means when you look at the polywire, it does indeed look different to all other polywires in the market, and that the weave is particularly intricate, and it means that there's always a very high chance of getting a shock from the wire wherever you are. Some other manufacturers the weave's quite loose, and there's long sections of polywire where there's not a conductive wire at all, meaning stock can touch the fence and not get a shock, which kind of defeats the object. The polywire is carried on the Kiwitech spool. That's super tough polycarbonate and very impact resistant. It will carry up to 400 meters of the Kiwitech polywire and no more. It can store 2 release hooks. We'll look at those later on, but they're the devices which are clipping the spools to the fence, and that's the unique thing with the Kiwitech system, is the geared pack can be taken away and the spool's just left clipped on the fence, which means you're not tying a lot of money up on fence lines that might stay up for a while. The geared reels then, the Speedrite geared reels, they come bare and you can add polywire of your choice to them. There's 2 options for polywire. There's the Speedrite polywire, spelled with an I, that uses 6 times 0.15mm stainless steel strands. It's very economical. It does have a 3-year warranty. And on a standard geared reel, you can fit 500 meters or 1,000 meters on the mega reel. So good for long fence lines and big fields. There's an alternative option, which is a higher spec wire that uses 6 0.25mm copper strands. It's 100 times more conductive than the standard Speedrite polywire. So this makes it particularly useful for long temporary fences that might stay erected for longer periods of time. So it may be a field that's rented that's going to split through the middle, and the fence is going to be up for the season. So it's much, much more conductive. It's a really good thing to use for constructing these sort of, verging on semi-permanent temporary electric fencing systems. The downside with it is it's a larger diameter, so you don't get as much on a reel, only 200 meters on a standard reel or 400 meters on a mega reel. So you might add extra reels to the system in order to use it effectively. When it comes to starting and ending the fences, there's a variety of options. The first option with the Kiwitech system is to use a Kiwitech end assembly. It's a strainer and strut arrangement that can be erected anywhere, and it will support up to 400 meter 1-wire or 2-wire fence, or up to 300 meter 3-wire fence. It can be carried in the pack, so you've got it with you, and it's a really useful situation, particularly if you're not going to terminate the fence at a boundary, such as in the photo above. The field there is divided in half. the fence might start at a boundary, but it can have to be terminated in the middle of the field. So the end assembly is really useful and necessary there. Hey, it's an end assembly, you don't need a sledgehammer to drive in, which is a big advantage. The second option is to use a release hook, either to start the fence as part of an end assembly or to connect the spool to a permanent stock fence, such as netting, barb, high tensile barb, or high tensile plain wire. The third option, which can be used with the gear reel or with the Q-Tech spool, is to use something called a Zama handle. The Zama handle is a really cool handle. It's lightweight, pretty cost effective, and it's got two hooks. It's got a live hook for making a fence live, and it's got an insulated hook for running on a boundary or a fence you don't want to power. And the picture there showing with number 3, the insulated hook will be the correct option to start the fence against that stock netting. We obviously don't want to power that stock netting because it's going to drain or going to drop our voltage quite significantly. So moving on to tools, and this tool section really covers permanent electric fencing. No tools in particular needed for temporary electric fencing. But when it comes to tools, an essential tool if we're going to do the fence erection ourselves is a spinning jenny. The coils of wire we're talking about weigh 25 kilos, and the 2mm wire contains over 1,000 meters of wire in that 25 kilo coil. So a spinning jenny is going to help you dispense that nice and evenly, nice and smoothly without any tangles. Once the wire has been attached to the strainer post at both ends, or certainly at least at one end, you can use something called a Hayes strainer or monkey wrench to tension the plain wire. You can also use for tensioning barbed wire. That will get you a straight line to put your posts in. Number 3, and almost an essential tool for the tool belt of any wannabe or willing fencer, is the Hayes 5-in-1 Pro Crimp tool. So that will cut, strip underground cable, pull staples extremely effectively, join wire using the HC2 crimps in picture number 4, and connect underground cable with the HCE crimps in picture number 5. So a hammer and the Pro Crimp tool, basically the only tools you need to erect an electric fence. We've covered 4 and 5 being the crimps, and they come in pots of 100 or 50 or 100 I should say. And then the last tool on that page is number 6, which is the tool for tensioning the wire using the inline strainer. So that was the aluminium wheel we saw, which tensions the wire by pulling it in from both ends. And that tool is really, really handy to use with that system. Tools that are quite specific to the Q-Tech solution is the arrow post pilot and the arrow post rammer. The arrow post rammer can be used with the 1250mm or the 1400mm posts. It contains an insert which is screwed in and out to make sure it's the perfect length for the posts. And so that really is a clever bit of kit. It will both drive in the posts as well as remove them, because an arrow post, once driven in the ground, is almost impossible to remove by hand, particularly if it's been in the ground sort of more than 5 or 6 months, and the root system's kind of formed around it and around those barbs you saw once they sit below the sort of surface. Those tools can be hired, so if you're going to do a short amount of fencing and can't justify buying the tool for yourself, then they can be hired from the Progressive Farming Company on a weekly rate. Number 3 and number 4 are the standard, are the plain post rammers. They come in 2 sizes, the standard for 1250mm plain posts and the long for the 1500mm plain posts. They're thoroughly recommended because they keep the post nice and straight whilst you're driving in the ground, and they are the perfect length to ensure the perfect or correct post height once the post has been driven. The last tool is number 5, the galvanized clip applicator, and that's a really special tool that makes light work of clicking the galvanized clip together to secure the wire, or clicking it back the other way to remove the wire from the clip. So it's an essential tool if you can use the galvanized wire clips. So just for context, it'll be useful to have a look at a real life example. So this is a field indeed owned by real life Farmer Jones, and it was split into 16 paddocks and grazed by 45 yearling cattle over a 12-month period. That field produced 50% more live weight per hectare compared to a control field next door where the animals were just set stocked. So this links back to what we discussed in the first section of the first part, or in part 1 of this how-to series, in the significant benefits of grazing management and of rotational grazing systems to increasing productivity as well as reducing input costs. So how was the field divided? Well, it was divided first of all into 4 lanes, and to do that, 2mm high tensile cyclone wire was used, together with 1250mm arrow posts at 50-meter spacing. The fence was strained using 100 to 125mm by 2.1 meter wooden posts, and they were also the same posts we used for the turners. And a pinlock insulator, a wooden post pinlock insulator, was installed on the turner posts to allow the wire to be dropped to the floor if needed. So once the lanes have been constructed, which look like that, 3 temporary fences were then added, and the Kiwitech temporary fencing system was chosen using Kiwitech polywire, Kiwitech 1-wire posts, and a Kiwitech 1-wire carry pack was used to erect the fences. And they look like that. And that was all that was needed to create those 16 paddocks. The animals were moved every 2 to 3 days around the paddocks, and the field simply produced much more grass than normal because of that rotation, because the grass was getting a rest period. You can see in the image actually the control group in the field next door. The field's starting to look quite bare in this midsummer period, and then the field in front, you see the patchwork of green indicating the sort of different lengths of recovery the different parts of that field have or had. The 16 paddocks, 15 paddocks are getting a rest, one's being grazed. The field that's being set stocked, all of the field's being grazed. And that's the difference in production, simply came from that change in management. The materials for that field cost around £1,500. The gain in live weight paid back those materials in the first year, leaving the field to be effectively producing extra profit in the subsequent years. So that concludes part 3. Please join us in part 4, where we will be talking about Energizers and earthing. If you can't wait and want to move on to water systems, then you can find that in part 5.